And the conversation, I think, literally went, "Hi, hello, how are you? I'm good." And literally the next thing was, "We're looking for candidates in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and we think you should run against Boris Johnson for MP." Uh, and I think I went, "What?" Like trying to clarify, "You mean running for MP?" And they said, "Yeah." And I might have said something to the degree of "fuck off" and hung up the phone. Um,
What are you listening to?
The Get to Know podcast.
You're listening to the Get to Know
podcast.
Get to Know.
It's the Get to Know podcast, and I am joined by Labour councillor Ali Milani. Ali, how you doing?
I'm keeping well, man. Keeping well. Thank you very much for having me. Excited to have a chat. This is, I think we're all in unique times, so it's good to be able to have this digital conversation with you.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm really excited to have you on. With you, the first time I ever saw you and what was happening, I kind of felt invested immediately. So yeah, it's good to kind of have the opportunity to break that down a little bit.
Yeah. I think our campaign was so unique in Uxbridge, whereby a lot of people were invested in my story and the sort of journey into politics, but also a lot of people just hated Boris Johnson, and so I was in the privileged position where my opponent was so disliked that naturally it drove people to liking me. I like to think I had a little bit to do with it as well, but I fully hold my hands up to say that I think hatred of Boris Johnson or dislike of Boris Johnson also certainly played a role in that.
Yeah, of course. I think it's not often that like a local campaign kind of gathers like national support, because I'm sure there are people like other side of the country kind of keeping an eye on it and looking out for your results.
Yeah. I'm just writing. Just signed a book deal, and I'm writing the book of the story of the campaign. And
Yeah, so
I've been reflecting on when I got selected, the first campaign session that we held. No one showed up. It was just me. I sat on a park bench, and I was just thinking about how are we gonna mobilize the amount of people that we need to be able to knock on enough doors and speak to enough people to at least have a shot at this campaign. And then thinking back to the last session that we had, where we had almost 1,000 people show up. We didn't have enough like doors for people to knock on. People refused to go home. I think we had at least 5 or 6 cameras in terms of major news broadcasters filming the entire session, all the way from BBC, Washington Post, all the way to like Norwegian and European, German news outlets as well. So it's a pretty incredible journey, I think, for a local campaign.
man. Yeah, definitely. All right, man. So to get into things, we're going to do the quick fire round. So I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, and you just give me your preferred answer. Okay.
Okay. This is exciting.
All right. First one: English or maths?
English, 100%. Yeah, I did surprisingly well in my English. When I got my results, with my English A-level results, both me and my teacher were questioning as to whether they marked the right person's paper. So I did surprisingly well.
Messi or Ronaldo?
Ronaldo, 100%. Did it in more countries, has done it for his country. I actually think he's also a better football in terms of he's better in the air, stronger. Messi is probably the second best player ever, but Ronaldo I think is a different level and has proven it in different leagues as well.
Do you reckon that's your Man United bias coming through as well?
100%, 100%. He's also won Messi's been in the World Cup final but never won it. Ronaldo won a European Euros for his country as well, so I think that plays an influence as well. And he's a Red, always will be.
Films or TV series?
Ooh, films still. There's still nothing from I love TV series. I've just watching gotten into One Division. The new Superman and Lois show is out, which is pretty exciting as well. I just finished The Good Place, if anyone's seen it, which is quite funny. But I don't think anything beats being in an actual movie theater for me, and kind of escaping for 2 or 3 hours.
Cats or dogs?
Cats, I think, for me. I don't know. There's just something about the fact that you have to earn their love a little bit more, which, which is funny.
Xbox or PlayStation?
PlayStation, yeah. Although you know what, like I'm hearing, this PlayStation 5 is impossible to get hold of, apparently.
Yeah, it seems that way. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, I was jumping on FIFA last night, and a couple of the guys I play with were saying came out in November, and no, it's still to this day no one can get their hands on it.
Yeah,
But
I don't get it.
I've always been a PlayStation guy. I remember when I was a kid, I got a PlayStation 1, which was like the most exciting thing, but we could only afford to get one game, and I got the Hercules game. And for some reason, my mum tells me there was a cheat code section that you can put in cheat codes, and I was engrossed by that. So I wouldn't actually play the game. I would just go and try and guess the cheat codes all day, putting in random codes. I don't know
I
if
had that
that's,
game as well, actually.
Yeah.
I wasn't privy to the
That says
cheat
anything
codes.
about me, but yeah.
And orange juice or apple juice?
Apple.
Oh, Apple or Android?
Apple again, as you can. You know what? Like, this is another thing. Funny story. I got told off by my mum a couple of years ago because I was upgrading my phone, and she was asking me whether I'd consider not getting an iPhone. And I just felt like I'm too old to change now, man. I'm too used to this, to the way the screen feels. And she was like, "You're 23. What do you mean you're too old to change now?" But I'm definitely set in my ways with my iPhone.
Yeah, same. And Nike or Adidas?
Ooh, that's a hard one. When I was a kid, it was definitely Nike. Growing up now, I'd say Adidas. It's more comfortable, more range. But when I was a kid, there was Nike. What were those 90 with the football shoes that had the 90 on them?
Total 90s.
Total 90s.
Yeah,
Bro, if
legendary
you had
shoes.
If you
Legendary
had
boots,
total
man.
90s in the playground, you were it, man.
Yes, man.
Definitely,
Yes.
like, I'm pretty sure our football teams were picked on who had total 90s.
Kanye West or Jay-Z?
Jay-Z. Yeah.
Biggie or Tupac?
Tupac for sure, yeah.
Spider-Man or Batman?
Batman, no doubt about it. DC over Marvel every day of the week. Well excited for the Snyder Cut. This is when again, another side story. I hope I'm not rambling, but
No.
when I did the Guardian, so the first big piece of press my campaign got was when the Guardian followed me around after the Trump protest, and they did this interview in my flat, and people were fascinated by my flat because usually the common rule in politics is don't invite people into your home because it's too much of a it's too high risk. But we invited the Guardian back into my flat, and it's a little studio, probably the size of like Boris Johnson's front room, but with like an attached toilet and kitchen. And I have this. I'm a bit of a DC fan, big DC fan, and I've got all of my comics and films and stuff all laid out. And I remember the team telling me beforehand, make sure you get rid of that before the Guardian come in, because I'm not sure. We're not sure how voters are going to take the fact that you have a shrine to DC in your house. And I don't know if we forgot or I dug my heels in and decided not to, and the Guardian actually captured it. And I got rinsed in every WhatsApp group I'm in because of my so-called DC toys. But I've decided to lean into it in recent years.
I embrace
big
it,
DC
man.
fan. Batman, world's greatest detective, 100%.
Winter or summer?
Ooh, summer.
Nice.
Summer, yeah.
And finally, what is your favorite holiday destination?
Oh, that's a good one. I was surprised. I'm like a Londoner through and through, firmly of the belief London is the greatest city in the world, and no other city comes close. But I went to Paris a couple of years ago, and I really loved Paris. The museums, great food, Um, and so I think Paris is probably my favorite
Okay,
location.
sound.
Yeah. Also because the weather reminds me of London, I guess. Um, so the other one was Chicago. I went to Chicago for when I was following the Bernie Sanders campaign, and Chicago reminded me of London as well. So Chicago's cool.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
All right, so to get started, Ali, can you tell me a little bit about your background and growing up? I mean, I know you came to the UK from Iran at 5, unable to speak English. I mean, that must have been quite the experience.
Yeah, yeah. So my family, this story, like again, it engrossed so many people, but it certainly in my community in the part of London, sort of urban London that I grew up in, it wasn't an extraordinary story. It wasn't, stop the presses. Pretty much, most of my school had a story somewhat similar to mine. Yeah, my family came to the UK when I was 5. And so we didn't speak any English. I went to primary school in Northwest London and then secondary school and college in Northwest London as well. Um, I grew up in a council estate with a single mum, um, and who relied on the welfare state to put food on the table. The roof over our head was a council estate, and I went to a comprehensive state school. And I think that journey. Um, when I was running in the campaign, people were asking me, aren't you a little bit too young, too inexperienced? What sort of experience do you have to become a member of parliament? And as I grew into the role, I realized, and the more I spoke to people, the more I realized that actually my journey was the best experience I had because, the mantra that we had in the campaign was that people deserved leaders and MPs who understood what it was like to live like them. And I think my story is a far more common story in the UK of struggling to make ends meet, of not having everything handed to us, and having to navigate issues of poverty, of crime, of sort of difficulties in terms of seeing a future for yourself in the country. I think that's a far more common thread in the UK than a Boris Johnson, for example. And I only use him as the example because I ran against him. But insert David Cameron, George Osborne, anyone you want in that who went to Eton and Oxbridge and were essentially chiseled for public office. So I think my story was as important to the campaign as anything else, and is why it related to so many people. So yeah, and I went to school I went to St. Augustine's High School, which is in Kilburn, South Kilburn, at the time. And we thought, like genuinely, I thought we had a great childhood. Um, like playing football at the back of the estate, getting in trouble, because we'd be playing football in areas that the council weren't necessarily happy with. Being a councillor now, I kind of understand some of the some of the headache that we caused. But yeah, I growing up until really my first year of college, I thought that world that I existed in this country was the only world that existed, and didn't know that there were two different worlds essentially that exist, and one being the world of Boris Johnson, and the other one being the world of Ali Milani and millions of others. So yeah, it was we I still to this day loved my childhood. Wouldn't trade going to school in St. Augustine's for Eton for nothing. I went to Brunel University as well in West London. Would never have traded that for an Oxford or a Cambridge at all, because I think ultimately both the education we received and the understanding and the pain that we felt is one that millions other face. And that is my best tool in politics, is being able to understand what life is like for most folks.
So you said that it was like first year of college, you kind of opened your eyes to, there being another world outside yours. What happened that led you to this realization?
So, like there was a growth. I think what I try and describe sometimes is that there was an angst within us. Like we were a little bit angry at the world around us, but we couldn't articulate as to why that was. And particularly being from a minority community, the war in Iraq was a big thing. By the time we got to college, the austerity program was in full force. So 2008, the economy crashes, and rather than reforming the finance sector and making the banks who caused the crash pay for the crisis, people like my family were forced to pay for the crisis by cuts to essentially the welfare state and the benefit system that many of us relied on. Um, and so there was this growing angst that seeing things change. We had our maintenance allowance, our educational maintenance allowance cut. So we used to get £30 a week to go to college, and that was cut. I started to see my family struggling a little bit more as the benefit system started to get squeezed down by the coalition government. And so there was this growing angst within us, and I think the lid burst on that when they decided to treble the tuition fees. And I remember, thinking at the time, because we would have been the first generation to have to pay the £9,000 fees. And there was something about that seemed deeply unfair, particularly given the fact that the people that were doing it didn't pay a penny for university, and now suddenly we're making us pay £9,000. And the student protests that were organised was probably what opened our eyes to politics. And I remember all of us being gathered in this common room because there was a walkout at lunchtime to go to the demo. I think it was in the winter of 2010, because I remember it being freezing, and I think it even snowed. But we all gathered in the common room, and a couple of us got up and gave what I would later learn to be my first political speech, kind of encouraging people to go to the student demonstration. And I think something like 90% of our college did walk out and go to the protest. But I think that was the moment, I think, for sure, that kind of lifted the lid on all the angst and anger that had been within us because of the world that had been built around us, and the sudden change of the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government. And so, that was a major moment for me. I had planned to study film. That's what I wanted to be a film director. That was my big dream going into university. But after the demonstrations and that sort of that journey in early college for me, I decided to change my course to politics. And I remember coming home from the protests, the student protest, and the amount of people that were there. I was convinced that the government would U-turn, because I had just never seen anything like it. Now, bear in mind, we'd had the Million Man March with Iraq before, but I hadn't been there or conscious of being there. And so I was convinced that the government was going to change tack, because how could they not? Did you not see the thousands of young people on the street who were demanding change? And then when they didn't, I remember being like, wait, hang on a minute, what? How could they not listen, and feeling powerless? And I never wanted to feel that powerless again, never wanted my community to feel that powerless again, and I was angry. And so I decided to redirect that anger into a constructive force. And I decided to get into politics. Whether that's a good decision or a bad decision, you'd have to ask me again in like 10, 15 years. Whether that was a good decision or not. But that was certainly the journey that I went on. And, I look around politics now, and the new generation that have come through, and a lot of faces will tell you the same story within our circles, that student protest was the fire, essentially, the match that lit the fire, that got us all involved.
So even though the government didn't U-turn on that decision, do you think that kind of was the start of a even bigger change?
Oh yeah, I think it was a mistake, and I don't think they realized the wave of young people that they politicized through that, and made politically conscious of the importance of government elections and the impacts that can have. Now, I still think we're a long way away from in terms of youth involvement, but I definitely think there was a wave of young people getting involved as a result of the trebling of tuition fees. And it had a real impact on, I think, our political culture as well, because the Liberal Democrats had actually run a campaign on not increasing tuition fees, and then essentially you turned on that, and I think that had a big impact on trust in politics as well. But certainly my generation in politics, when I look around now, that moment was probably as influential a moment as anyone could point to. To I know who would have known it at the time, right? All these students on Westminster Bridge burning maths books to stay warm because the police had kettled us. Um, but yeah, who would have known it at that moment that that would be the spark essentially that got so many of us involved in politics.
Oh, sorry, what do you mean by the police kettled you?
So at the time, it was well noted, but not just us, but because there was a number of different protests, and in the 2010 one, the winter one, the police kind of surrounded the students and wouldn't let us leave and wouldn't. Essentially, it was freezing as well. So kettling is a sort of police tactic to keep the group in one confined space, and they would surround the protesters and not let anyone in or out. Um,
Okay.
and we were held for hours, and people would like burn their maths books to stay warm to that's the stories that we got afterwards as well. So yeah, hugely influential moment, I think, for British politics. And I suspect in 10 years you will see a lot more new and prominent political faces that were there that night.
So you've decided to study politics at uni. So what, at that point, say when you've just started, what were your long-term intentions, if any?
When I decided to study politics,
Yeah.
I thought I'd be an activist for life, right? I never imagined that I would stand for public office because it was not something that I ever consciously entertained the idea in my mind. Um, and so I thought that I could be a decent sort of community activist, fighting for changes at local authority level, at government level, lobbying government to make changes. Maybe work in the charity sector, maybe work in the third sector. But the reason I say this is political office was never in my conscious mind, even all the way at the sort of when I got to university, and while I was studying politics at university, it was never with the intention. And this is the main difference, I think, because that Boris Johnson world that I told you about, the Eton Oxbridge, they really do embed it in your mind from an early age that you absolutely have an opportunity to go on and become MPs and prime ministers. And partially that's to do with the fact that so many people that went to your school eventually become prime ministers. I think somewhere in the region of 27 to 29% of the members of parliament, so nearly 1 in 3 members of the parliament come from private schools, compared to 7% of the population. So massively overrepresented. I think the difference in percentage is 314% increase from 7 to 27 to 29% in terms of how many people go to private school. So when we went to school and the culture that we grew up in, it was never implanted in our minds that public office was a place for us. And we kind of accepted that political norm that to be an MP or to be a prime minister or a cabinet member, you needed to go to Eton and Oxbridge. So I had accepted that culture when I went to university and thought that I would be, the pain in the arse with the megaphone outside the building demanding change. It wasn't until much later on, and through a lot of struggle, that I ever built the confidence in my own mind that I could stand. And even while I was standing, you get that imposter syndrome of should I be here? Am I qualified to say these things? And the system kind of reinforces that. But when I went to university and as I was studying politics, I always imagined myself being an activist for life. And I guess I am. There's no reason why an MP shouldn't be an activist for life. But yeah, I didn't remember. If you would have told me, even after that student protest, that you would stand against the Prime Minister for Parliament, I would have laughed you out the room and asked you what you were smoking / drinking.
So, now that you're, fully involved in politics, how does it differ from what you were taught at uni? Do you feel like you were well prepared from what you learned, or was there a lot that you kind of experienced that you had to pick up for yourself and you weren't aware of?
So there's a difference between politics and party politics. I think the world of the Labour Party, I hadn't learned anything about, and have had to learn on my feet about the institution of the Labour Party and the way that kind of politics works. So in a way, studying politics doesn't prepare you really for the game of politics that is that exists in the Labour Party and in Westminster as a whole. I would say the most valuable lessons and the most valuable tools I learnt or I use and experience in politics uh, happened outside the confines of like formalized education. They happened through my story. They happened through my experience with my mum. My mum was made homeless when I was at university because of our changing circumstances. So when I moved out of the house, because we received council estate, we lived on a council in a council flat. Because the occupants of the house moved, she got kicked out of the house that we were in and had to live in a hostel for a long time. And so that experience, the pain and anger and all these kind of things taught me a lot more about the role of a public representative than a lecture hall ever did. My experience in my campaign of talking to people, hearing their stories, and being able to connect with them, to connect with your community, taught me far more than any seminar at university did. That being said, all of that is underpinned with the context of politics, of being able to understand our history, of where the mechanisms and the levers of power are, and how exactly do we change things. There's no good feeling the pain and anger if I, as a public representative, can't turn that into policy and turn that into improving the lives of members. And so both things were important, but what I would say is the thing that we're missing is we have plenty of politicians that understand how to pass laws and understand the context and history of British politics, but I would go as far as to say the majority haven't felt the pain most of the communities have felt, haven't needed to think about when the next meal is coming from, haven't had to worry about their mum being homeless and whether she's going to get hostel for that night. They don't understand what life is like for most folks in the country, and that is as valuable, if not more valuable, than sort of institutional knowledge. Anyone can learn institutional knowledge.
Sure. So, what was it that drew you to the Labour Party?
This is a funny story. I hope he's not going to be upset with me for telling this story, but if he is, I apologize in advance, John, for telling this story. So I was a little bit of a smart ass at university. I was the guy that was I had an element of cynicism about me, which I don't recognize in myself now, by the way. It's a huge change, I think, from the time I went to university. But I was the one that said they're all the same. All the political parties and all the politicians are the same. They're all corrupt. And I went to, as a first year university student, I went to, our politics society was hosting this talk with John McDonnell, who was the local MP. Later became the shadow chancellor of the Exchequer under Jeremy Corbyn. And I remember going to this talk, and I went with the intention of giving him a hard time. So I thought, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a smart ass and I'm going to show this guy why they're all corrupt. And he does his talk and we get to the question and answer session, and I put my hand up and I get picked to ask one question. I asked 6 and I wouldn't let the microphone go. Everything ranging from how, your party invaded Iraq to, why is the party not stronger on austerity and the cuts to government, all this kind of thing. And I sat back, and as he answered, I was physically shocked because he answered all my questions honestly, and he addressed my points, and I agreed with almost everything he said. But even when I didn't, it was a very different picture of a politician to the one that I had in my mind of the Nick Cleggs who had promised us one thing and done the other, and the David Camerons who had sat in their room while we were outside in the freezing cold shouting. I got the fact that he cared and he was honest and he addressed me directly. And I remember after the event, I kind of scrambled to the front and I said to him, I've never campaigned for the Labour Party, not even a member, wouldn't even consider joining, but I want to campaign for you. And he gave me his contact information and told me to stay in touch. And I think John broke the barrier in my mind where I realized politics is more complex than that, and cynicism doesn't help anyone. There's no progress can be made with cynicism. And yes, there are plenty of politicians that are that picture that I painted, but there's also plenty of Johns out there who are also fighting to improve things for their local community. He's the only MP at that time that I knew that lived in the area that he represented. He took the bus to his constituency office, and so would speak to local residents and hear their stories, and he was one of them. So I wouldn't join the party for another 2 years because it was that much of a mental sort of block to get over. But I realized over time that the Labour Party does have a proud history of fighting for working people, and it's not immune to some of the symptomatic problems in politics, but it is the party that seeks to change things for working people, and you know, everything from the introduction of the minimum wage to the cut in child poverty, to, you know, the resistance to austerity in more recent years. This is the party that I felt home in. And once I joined and I got to meet the members, that's when the real cynicism started to leave me, because I saw hope in these members. You know, they all wanted the same sort of world, wanted to fight for a different world the same way I did. They were hopeful, optimistic. There was an amazing community there, and so my perspective shifted 180 from being a student showing up to that, to actually joining the Labour Party, seeing the Labour Party for what it is and what it could be, and the potential it has for change. And this is the one thing I would say to anyone listening who sometimes gets angry. I don't agree with everything the party does sometimes, or individual party members or Labour Party MPs do, or even the leadership does. But as far as the United Kingdom's politics goes, the Labour Party is our best route for change, and the party isn't just the leadership, it's also the members, and the members that I have met are awesome forces for change, and so that I think that talk that I went to with John, combined with meeting Labour Party members and that journey that I went through, kind of got me into the Labour Party. And now I proudly say this: I love that this is the party I love. It's a party I feel at home in, and I was proud to be. I'm proud to be a Labour councillor, and I was proud to be a Labour candidate for Parliament.
So what does the role entail of being a Labour councillor?
So look, a lot of it is you're the local representative for the ward that you represent. So I'm in Heathrow Villages, which is the surrounding sort of villages and residents around Heathrow Airport, and a lot of the powers that people think sit in local government or sit in national government actually sit in local authorities. Things like housing, things like infrastructure, local health, even. A lot of the mechanisms for change sit in local authorities, and so I always say politics is always local, and so we have an amazing opportunity to change and impact the lives of local residents for the better. And so it includes everything from constituents getting in touch about potholes and bins, all the way to us, finding homes for young families who have been made homeless, to holding the local hospitals and health sectors accountable for good services, supporting them in delivering good services for members. So it's a pretty broad-ranging thing, but I just wish more people got involved in it, because there's so much opportunities for helping people and changing local lives through local authorities, and we really need to get that message out there.
How have you found it? Since you were elected, how's it been against maybe your expectations?
Yeah, it's been cool. Look, my favorite part of I think it's pretty clear is interacting with people. It's tough because we're in opposition, and our local Tories are really shit. So it's difficult because the big things that we want to change, we just can't do it because we don't have a majority in the council. But yeah, when I got in, people were get ready to get a lot of emails about bins, and that has 100% been true. But it's not a throwaway comment, because it has legitimately has an impact on people's lives. If the bins don't get cleaned up, and if it impacts everything from how nice the community looks, being able to walk, the health of the local community, all the way to climate change and the impacts it has on our environment. I'm particularly, we have a particular challenge in Heathrow because everything from the third runway expansion to the air quality, these are big things that we have to fight. So we have to fight on often tougher ground than others. In that area of West London, we breathe in some of the worst air in Europe, quality of air, where I am now. So I think climate change and the environment are big areas of our work. The local council in Hillingdon took the government to court over the third runway expansion as well, and won. So being able to influence national policy and climate change as a whole, and potentially even the world, is pretty exciting stuff. So I would definitely encourage more people to do it, but particularly talking to young folk, man. We need more young. Like I show up to council meetings, and no word of an exaggeration, man, the average age must be like 96. When myself and Kerry Prince, who were two local councillors who were on the younger side, showed up to our first council meeting, we must have dropped that average age by like 20 years. So we're always trying to get more young people involved, because that young perspective is really important in local authorities. So
you were the president of your uni SU, and you were also the vice president of the NUS. So how do you think those roles prepared you for where you are now and where you could be headed? The 2 years at Brunel as SU president was probably the best years so far of my political life, because we got so much done and so much changed, and it was really like, because when I became president, it was my playhouse, man. I could essentially, all the ideas that you had, there was space for them to become reality. My time at NUS probably best prepared me for politics, because NUS, I would say NUS is national politics plus 5 years. So something that becomes mainstream in NUS 5 years on becomes mainstream in national politics. And you can find so many people in particularly the Labour Party now, who were NUS officers. Everything from Wes Streeting now, who's the education minister, was the NUS president. The old Scottish Labour leader was also NUS president. So many of us have been involved in student politics. So NUS, in its unique culture and combativeness, being kind, probably best prepared me for some of the combativeness of the Labour politics as well. So what was next for you after you finished your terms in office? So it was actually while I was NUS vice president when I got the phone call as to whether I would consider standing for Uxbridge and South Ruislip against Boris Johnson. And I think other people saw the potential in the story before I did. And I'm kind of giving some of the spoilers of the book away, but it's okay. I got a phone call from someone, and I was it was a weekend, and I was doing a seminar for young people, trying to get more young people involved in NUS, more students involved in NUS. And the conversation, I think, literally went, "Hi, hello, how are you? I'm good." And literally the next thing was, "We're looking for candidates in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and we think you should run against Boris Johnson for MP." And I think I went, "What?" Like, trying to clarify, "You mean run for MP?" And they said, "Yeah." And I might have said something to the degree of "fuck off," and hung up the phone. And so was quite dismissive of the idea, and it took me months to kind of come around to the idea, with people saying, "Yo, just imagine the campaign you could run with being a young Muslim immigrant from a council estate, the story that you've had versus Boris Johnson, who wasn't the prime minister at the time, and imagine the poetic nature of this story." And I remember always thinking, yeah, that sounds all well and good, but you're not the one that has to do it. I'm the one that has to do it. And I'd already had plenty of interactions with the press, so knew what kind of thing to expect there. But eventually I came around to how powerful the story could be as well.
And so, yeah, my jump from student politics straight into national sort of politics happened quite quickly,
Wow.
more quickly than was the norm, I think, which was, which was fun, because, for a period there, I got both the pushback of being an NUS officer, which the press certainly doesn't like, and then running against probably the most prominent politician in the country, which also wasn't a lot of fun in terms of the press pressure, but wouldn't have changed it for anything. I think ultimately we made the right decision.
So why didn't the press like the fact that you're an NUS officer?
Look, there's when I say the press, I'm generalizing, and I probably shouldn't, because it's not the whole press, but certain sections of our right-wing press have a particular problem with NUS because of the progressive stances it takes on things. We got a lot of shit over the free speech stuff, which I thought was utter nonsense. Some of the pushback around free speech.
Could you elaborate?
Yeah, so when I was NUS officer, and still to this day, there was this big conversation around freedom of speech on campuses, and whether this whole woke students are shutting down debate, when nothing further from the truth could be the case. We were, I was monitoring the whole situation, and the only things getting shut down were, in fact, probably events happening which would be considered on the left of political stances. So I always thought it was a distraction mechanism by the Conservatives, by the Conservative government at the time. They generally not very pro-unions and student union organizing has been a historic place that has won things. Students had a historic role in keeping Britain out of the Vietnam War. They had a historic role in fighting apartheid in South Africa. And so, that sort of history means NUS has always had a difficult relationship with the right-wing press, particularly. And obviously, being the first Muslim vice president union development of NUS was only exacerbated that, and then going on to stand against Boris Johnson as well. But we had fun, man. They wrote stuff that wasn't true. I ignored it largely, sometimes tweeted funny things about them. But the best, okay, I can tell you this one. The first big one that I had was Katie Hopkins. So when I was SU president, Brunel University, in all its wisdom, decided to invite Katie Hopkins to participate in a debate on the welfare state. Katie Hopkins being the well-established economist and hugely respected figure in politics. That was sarcasm. That was sarcasm. Obviously, I realize this is a podcast and people aren't seeing my face. That was sarcasm. And so, we kicked up a big fuss about it, largely because this is someone who had said a lot of inflammatory things, and we didn't think it was appropriate for her to speak. This wasn't saying she didn't have the right to speak. It was saying what was the sense in inviting her from the university's perspective. And so we organized this walkout where the students stood up and walked out as she began to speak at the event. And I think we got 150 students to walk out at the time, and it went viral. It got 2-3 million views on YouTube within weeks. And it was a huge deal. It was all over BBC, and I remember coming in the next day and I was getting phone calls. We'd organized this big walkout of the Katie Hopkins event, and had I think the next day we had something like 130 press requests from everywhere, from the BBC, ITV to Romanian news channel, I think, that I did an interview for, which was fun. And so that was the first taste I got of mainstream press attention. And it would teach me, I think, a lot, because that would be a consistent theme of my life over the next couple of years.
So going on to continuing with your campaign, so a lot of people were invested in it, like we said earlier, and I kind of don't want to dwell on this part too much of it, because I know I'll get onto that a little bit later. But being an immigrant and a Muslim, given Boris Johnson's previous comments, was it almost a little bit personal for you as well? It's political.
Yeah, 100% personal, because I think what Boris doesn't realize is when he says the things he says, he's questioning whether I belong in this country and whether people like me have a place in this country. And I see myself, this is my country as much as it is his, and my communities as much as it is theirs. This part of the story of Britain is all of us, I think. And so it was 100% personal for me, not just as an immigrant, but also, as a working class kid who grew up in a council estate. The story of the poverty that we went through was crossed all racial lines as well. Obviously, minority communities are disproportionately affected by it, but I think my journey into it made it personal for me. The fact that it happened to be Boris Johnson made it even more so, and also the impacts that people's words have as well. I tell you another story. I'm really just giving the whole book away here, but in the first big event we held, so we had this real trouble early on in the campaign of getting enough people campaigning, largely because it was so far away from an election, but also we weren't really gathering the fire that we wanted. And then the Guardian interview that we did kind of blew things up, and suddenly we had all this attention. And we did this unseat Boris Johnson event with Owen Jones outside the council offices, where we had Owen came, Diane Abbott came, Richard Bergen came, who were all front benchers at the time, and I think Owen Jones came and spoke, and we were all supposed to go off and campaign afterwards. And the night before, I got a death threat through my door. So a handwritten death threat, essentially, that was slipped through my letterbox without a postage stamp. So someone had walked up to my door, knew where I'd lived, and posted this. It was a real unique. It wasn't the first time I'd received a death threat. It was the first time I had received a handwritten one through the door. And I remember calling one of my friends and saying, "Look, we've got this big event tomorrow, and if someone wanted to come and do something, right? What measure? What can we do?" And I remember us being on the phone for 45 minutes and essentially saying, "Well, there's not much we can do." And we reported it to the police, and they came, and from then on, we regularly reported big campaign events, and they would come. Sometimes plainclothes police officers would come with me as a form of sort of security at these big events. But I remember having that conversation, going, "Oh, there's not much we can do." And then, this plays in my mind now of, some of the things that Boris had said, and the climate that these kind of politicians have created have fed into this. I mean, Joe Cox was murdered by a far right individual. So I think it was definitely personal for me because I had experienced it my whole life. I wasn't talking about politics in the abstract. When I was railing against austerity, when I said how cruel it wasn't because of statistics. It was because of what my family had gone through. When I'd spoken about the culture of racism that Boris had fed into with some of his comments, it wasn't abstract. It was because I was receiving death threats as a Muslim immigrant candidate. Not an immigrant candidate, but you know what I mean, as a Muslim immigrant who was a candidate. And I think that was the beauty of our campaign. It was the poetry. It was what we were saying. We were saying that, imagine the message it would send to Westminster if my story could unseat his. Imagine the impacts it would have on our politics, and the hope that it would force into our politics if someone from my background was able to defeat him. What would it say about the accessibility of politics? And yes, we didn't win, but ultimately I think we made our point anyway. What local campaign in a seat with 5,000 majority gets thousands of people showing up to knock on doors? What local campaign and what local candidate who wasn't an existing MP has more press requests than members of the front bench of the shadow cabinet? I'm not sure any other, bar Faiza Shaheen maybe in Chingford as well, who also had a really, really poetic story. I don't know of local campaigns that ended up in the Washington Post, on CNN and BBC, ITV, Channel 4, everywhere. and had the thousands of people that came. I had people campaign for me who came from New York, who came from Denmark, who came from Sweden. By the end of the campaign, we did this game where I would ask people to shout out what the furthest distance they've come to campaign from us. And it started off by people saying Brighton and Nottingham, and it ended with New York. People had flown over to campaign for us. And did it have something to do with Ali Milani? Maybe. Mostly what it had to do with was the story that we were telling. We were telling people something else was possible. And I think the end result was almost irrelevant to that now. At the time, obviously it wasn't, but now I think the point was made, and we set an example of, I think, how you can run a local campaign that inspires so much hope. I knocked. Some of the most powerful moments for me was when I knocked on doors, and young people, communities of color, whether it was working class kids who grew up in the same area, white working class kids who grew up in the same area as me, would open the door, and I'd say, I'm here from the Labour Party, and I would tell them I was the candidate, and I would see their eyes light up, where they'd be like, wow, you'd like someone like me is the candidate running against Boris Johnson. And again, I try and add as much humility in that it's not necessarily about who Ali Milani is. It's about being able to give these people, like a lot of these people who had the same mentality that I had as someone who went to university, about politics all being the same, and saying, no, we can change it. We just all have to come together to do that.
So the reason why I said I didn't want to dwell on you being an immigrant and being Muslim is because during your campaign, pretty much every headline was about you as Muslim immigrant running against Boris Johnson. It's like, so how did you find that? Was that annoying for you, or was it just, did it help you, or?
It was difficult, man. Like, because to a certain degree, I got it, and I didn't want to run from it. We weren't hiding the fact it's part of my story. It's part of this country's story. It's part of London's story specifically. We never ran from it at all. But it did get frustrating by the middle of the campaign when, like, journalists were incapable of writing a headline other than Muslim immigrant. And I was saying, these are important parts of my identity and important parts of my journey and my background, but that's not all I am. I'm a British citizen. I'm a Londoner. I have views on things other than immigration, for example, right? I have very strong views about immigration, but I have other views too. And I remember we did an interview with a particular journalist that I won't name, but I sat with her at a Costa, and I said I would do the interview with her on one condition, and I said she could ask me anything she wanted. We never put, and to this day, like, no journalist can say I ever did this. We never put preconditions on interviews that we did. They can always, I know a lot of politicians do this, where they say, well, we'll do the interview if you don't ask about X, Y, and Z, or we'll do the interview about this specific section alone. We never did that on purpose because, we believed part of the responsibility of the campaign was to allow anyone to ask anything. But the one prerequisite we put on this one was, just please don't make the headline Muslim immigrant. That's all I wanted. And we did the interview, and I said, look, put it in the body of the text, that's not, but just don't make the headline Muslim immigrant, because every single headline is about this one thing. And of course, the article came out, and it was Muslim immigrant, takes on Boris Johnson, and it was frustrating to me. But it was mixed emotions, like I said, we never wanted to run from it, because I do want to make the case for immigration. I do want to make the case for the value and vibrancy multiculturalism has brought to this country and continues to contribute to our society. But what I also want to say is part of that is accepting that we're all one Britain. We're all, this is part of the story of Britain. And I see myself as British first and foremost, not with caveats. I'm not a British immigrant, British Muslim, all this. I'm British, and this is my country, and this is my community, and I want to give back to my community and help change things where I can. And this one part of my identity doesn't define me. So that was a struggle. But we also never wanted to run from it, because we knew the power that presenting a positive sort of vision on these issues could have. So it was a bit both. But I would be lying to you if I didn't wake up some mornings, read some headlines, and get really angry at the fact that I was only being painted as one thing.
Yeah. But I guess, to a lot of people that would be inspiring. If you're a young immigrant and you say, you're running against Boris Johnson, I guess that could do a lot for a lot of people. And
and that's why I didn't want to run from it. That's why, we never wanted to hide that aspect of me when we did interviews and things like that. I always answered honestly, leaned into it, and made the case for why that part of my story helps me. Why it's as much a part of me as anything else, but it's not the only part, and that was what was tough. But yeah, I wouldn't have exchanged a moment of seeing our communities being able to see someone like me run against Boris Johnson for anything. I think it was really powerful, and was able to make the positive case, I think, for political engagement. Yeah.
So something that I really liked about your campaign is that you very much based it on speaking, to as many constituents as you could. And personally, I believe that as a representative of the people, that's exactly what you should be doing. So good on you for that, and I really like that.
Yeah, I think we knocked on more doors than any other constituency in the country, bar one or two. So we had the biggest turnout of rallies and things that we did. I started doing these Ask Me Anythings, which the Labour Party told me in no uncertain terms not to do, where we would book out these like halls and community spaces, and we would invite local residents to just show up and ask me anything. And we would do these roundtables where just like local folks would come, and we would just have chats about things. And we never once asked them to vote for us. In those settings, we just wanted to have a chat and be able to connect with people. I knew I would never outspend Boris Johnson, and I didn't. I knew I would never get more positive media coverage, or even as much media coverage as the Prime Minister of the country at the time. But I also knew that I could talk to more people than he did. I was confident on that, in that. So, and that was definitely something that we accomplished. And that's the reason why I think, when you actually look at the numbers, yes, we didn't win, but we outperformed the Labour swing by 10%. Again, the second best performing seat when you look at the national swing across the country. And there was a reason for that, I think.
Right, so what sort of message do you think it sends about politics in this country that one of the highest profile politicians is selected by his party to run in a constituency that he has no affiliation to, and then refuses to debate the opposition?
Yeah, I mean, look, you remember that I painted that picture of the two worlds that existed for us growing up. I think the same is true in our politics. That there's a class of politicians that think public office is a birthright, and that it should be a conveyor belt of the most privileged, wealthy in our society, and that the rest of us should kind of just go along with that. And then there are those of us in the Labour Party who believe that politics should be accessible to everyone, and it's called the House of Commons for a reason. It's supposed to be for the whole country. And so one of my big sort of dreams for our politics is to be able to open up the doors and make it as accessible to everyone, and make sure that voices like mine and others can be represented in our parliament, in all of our structures of government. And I think that's the true way in which we get the best, healthiest form of our democracy, is to have all of us, all of our communities represented. Sure.
So, of course, the election result wasn't what we wanted in the end, but what are your overall thoughts on the campaign, and what lessons did you learn, if any?
Look, like I said earlier, I think in the campaign I was committed to winning, and I thought we could win. And with a different national swing, I think maybe we could have. But I think we made the point. We told the story. We presented a vision, and thousands, hundreds of thousands probably, based on our social media stats, came along with us and saw what we were trying to do, and felt what we were feeling, I think, on the ground, in that the country is ready and hungry for a different kind of politician and politics that is more hopeful, more open, more accessible, less cynical, in the interests of all of us. And I think we made that point beautifully. I was able to see in the sea of faces in our campaign rallies, old and young, black and white, from different economic statuses, from different backgrounds and journeys, united in wanting a different, changing politics and being able to have someone like me beat someone like him. So despite losing, and I always say that we still massively outperformed the national swing in terms of seats, and we spoke to more people and knocked on more doors, I think the story of the campaign stands true. And I think the uniqueness of the attention and the fervent support and the incredible journey that our campaign went on shows that the country is ready for that sort of political message. Let's not forget, I started with no one showing up to my campaign events, literally sat on a park bench by myself, to thousands of people showing up and campaigning for us. And I think we just need the political courage to get us there. I sometimes worry that some of the people in our politics think politics is all about reacting, that it's all about what do people already think, and let me regurgitate that back to them. Focus grouping everything, so every sentence that comes out of someone's mouth going through a focus group or through some sort of stringent political structure. I don't believe that. I think I have this strong belief that I think people can smell authenticity a mile away. So when I'm doing this podcast with you, I have no notes. I just answer the questions as they come to me. And I always did that with all my interviews, knowing that I will make mistakes, but people will forgive me for those mistakes if they think I'm being honest, if they think I'm being genuine. And that's all I really have, because I don't have the money. I don't have the family backing, the family name, the friends that I made in the tea rooms of my Eton college that I went to. I don't have any of that. But what I do have is a story and a journey that connects with more people and a background that I think is reflective of millions of people in this country. And I want to be able to communicate in that in an honest and open way. And so I really think what our campaign showed was that you can campaign differently at a local level, that you can present a positive, hopeful, open message to the country, and people are ready and willing to come with you. You just have to have the political courage to do it. And I'm not just saying it wasn't me that had the political courage. It was the local Labour Party in Uxbridge and South Ruislip. It was my, campaign team. It was all of them together. I always believe this about movement building. It's not about any one individual. It's about all of us coming together. And in the story of that humility, let me tell you one last story. In the lead up to the campaign, because of the amount of pressure, the attention we had got, I got a little taste of what it was like to be semi-famous, right? I would go to local ASDA in Uxbridge, and people would stop me and tell me that they just voted for me via post, or that they supported our campaign. And then the day after the election, I went to get milk at the corner shop, and I got stopped by this guy. And this is after all the praise and all the attention that we had gotten in the weeks. This guy stops me the night after the election, after we had lost. He went, Ali Milani. And I went, yeah. He went, the local Labour candidate, you're going to run against Boris Johnson? And I said, yeah. And he looked me dead in the eye and went, Labour's shit, aren't they? And he just walked out of the corner shop. And my local corner shop guy obviously knows me. He was cracking up, bro. He was like, he thought it was so funny. And I remember thinking, what a way to come crashing back down to earth from all the publicity and press. This guy to look me dead in the eye and tell me Labour's shit, which I obviously don't agree with. But just a reminder that we still have so much work, so much more to do, and so much further to go.
One little thing I did want to bring up is, in the results night you, Boris Johnson, when they was reading out the results, and then Lord Buckethead gave Count Binface the finger when he got more votes than him.
Yeah.
I didn't see your reaction on the screen because it was on them, but what was your reaction to that?
We're going straight to Uxbridge, where the Prime Minister's seat is, and let's join the returning officer.
Is as follows. Harvey Jonathan David, commonly known as Count Binface, independent, 69. Hughes David Stephen, commonly known as Lord Buckethead. The official Monster Raving Loony Party, 125. Burke Norma, Independent.
I don't think I saw
Oh, really?
it because largely, I tell you what was going on in my mind. We knew we'd lost for hours before then because we were in the count as they're counting, so we knew we'd lost it. I didn't know I had to give a speech until I was walking up to the stage. So I thought only the winner gives a speech. But as I'm walking up, the returning officer tells us, the top 3 candidates have to give speeches. And obviously you've got the world's press in front of you. So when I was stood there, I was thinking, shit, what do you say when you've lost? Do you know what I mean? So I didn't see anything. In fact, funny story, I think I barged into Carrie with her dog, Boris's partner, and had no clue in the world who she was because I was so in my own mind of what speech I'm going to give. How can I how can I not lose the hope that we found in the campaign? Looking back now, the picture looks fucking ridiculous, man. You've got myself and Boris Johnson, and then you've got a guy dressed as Elmo, you've got Count Binface, Lord Buckethead, this dude in a weird, the BBC are communist shirts. I don't think I appreciated the spectacle of that stage while I was on it. Also, I was knackered, man. I had been up for 48 hours. To this day, I don't remember what I said. But I heard it was pretty good because even the Tories came up to me afterwards and said that was a good speech. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I guess ultimately the speech was pretty good. But no, I don't remember Count Binface or Lord Buckethead giving anyone the finger. They might have even given me the finger. Who knows?
No, it was. You have a look on YouTube, man. It's just a few minute video. It's quality, man. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
So,
endorsed me, by the way.
Oh, really?
Endorsed me. Yeah, they put out a video.
Fair play.
I remember it was in the heart of the campaign, 2 weeks to go to the campaign. I got a phone call on my personal mobile, and it was this guy who told me his name and said, it was either Buckethead or Binface. I think it was Binface. And he said, yo, I think you can win. I'm going to endorse you. And he was like, in an hour, I'm going to put up a video on Twitter endorsing you. And I remember putting down the phone and saying to my campaign manager, I was like, yo, I just got the weirdest phone call. And he was like, what happened? I was like, I think Count Binface is going to endorse us on Twitter. And he was like, what do you want to do? I was like, I just fucking ignore it. I don't know. What do you do? What do you do with that information? Yeah.
So something that I do like you said, is that you don't want to be a traditional MP. You wanted to keep being yourself. But I imagine that'll be quite difficult because, I think maybe quite a few MPs probably have that same mindset.
Yeah.
So, how do you intend on staying true to yourself?
I think a lot of it is where you're based. I really subscribe to John's sort of idea of once you become an MP, you should live amongst your constituents and they should be able to see you at the local shop and walking on the street and living amongst them. I think that has a huge impact because people are also amazingly honest. If they think you're doing a crap job, they'll let you know. So I think that's hugely important. Look, there's no doubt people change, but it's about how you change, One of the things I do privately, I try and read my personal statement that I wrote to university as to what, because you write this personal statement before you go to university as to why you want to get into politics. I try and read that once every couple of months to remind myself as to why I got involved. Joe.co.uk did this interview with me where I still play football or did before the lockdown. I play football with the same group of mates every Friday, and trust me, man, they'll keep you grounded. Because if I do an interview that's crap, a lot of the campaign team will be like, "Oh, it's okay, Ali." But when I show up on a Friday before the game, I'll get roasted. Or if I wear something, this is the worst part. This haircut, for example, I guarantee you, has been roasted more times than anything else, and it's not something that's choice. It's obviously lockdown, but. Being surrounded by the right people, staying true to your values, making sure you live amongst your community. I think all of these things have huge impacts on politicians. And also, I have no intention of being a sort of ordinary person involved in politics. That doesn't mean, who knows, I don't know if I'm ever going to restand again, or whether I'll find a different role for myself, or whether it's, getting behind someone else who I think is better suited for the job. But I will always hold true, I think, to the belief that one of the most important things a politician can have is being authentic and honest with their constituents. And I think people can feel it a mile away. Yeah.
And something I wanted to touch on briefly is, previously in your youth, there were some anti-Semitic tweets, but you've educated yourself, you've been to Auschwitz, and you also don't shy away from speaking about it. So in this age of cancel culture, how important do you think is that people are given the opportunity to learn from the error of their ways instead of just being cancelled?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't actually think cancel culture is a thing. I think the point is, in that same spirit of authenticity and honesty, I never claimed to be a perfect candidate, and someone who's free from mistakes. I had made these mistakes. I've been very open and honest about them, but it wasn't just about apologizing sincerely and learning from them. It was about growing as well. So I made an effort to go through the training, to engage with communities. Like you said, I was fortunate enough to go with the Holocaust Memorial Trust to Auschwitz and Birkenau and see the impacts anti-Semitism has. But one of the things I think it's important for our politics to learn is we're in a very different age now. And I think people are growing up in public.
Yeah.
And so comments that used to be confined to the common room or the playground are now being stored for the rest of our lives on social media, and doesn't make them any better, which is part of the reason why I was advocating for anti-racism and political training at schools. So mistakes I made are never repeated again. But we also have to get our politics to a place where it both educates young people on the impacts of their words, but also understands that we're in a different place now. And the test, I think, of a candidate isn't whether they've made any mistakes in their past. We all have. It's about how they deal with them and their openness and willingness to overcome them. And once we do that, I genuinely believe people are willing to forgive, with context and within reason. But I found, extraordinary kindness in people's willingness to forgive me for my errors, as long as I matched that kindness with a commitment of following through and making sure that those mistakes are never repeated. And I think our politics needs to get to that place to be more healthy, because I think we're just coming to terms with the era of social media, let's say.
Yeah. And what does success look like for you?
Success for me always looks like being able to change our politics into a place where our communities are represented, and that feeling of powerlessness Ali had in 2010 isn't repeated for young people coming through, where our politics is more representative of the communities that we're in. And for me, it's irrelevant as to whether Ali Milani is part of that story. It's whether all these our communities are, and being able to have a more open, more equal society, eradicating this disgusting level of poverty that exists in our society, tackling the racism and the nationalism that has been injected into our society and into our politics, and making sure our politics, the House of Commons, and the MPs people see on TV grunting and making fools out of themselves in the House of Commons, better represents the faces of the people that I see every day in Uxbridge. The people that I saw every day in South Kilburn, the faces that walked past me, should be reflective of those in the Houses of Commons. And I think we need a class of politicians who are more representative and understand what life is like for those in their communities, and with the political courage to tackle inequality, climate change, racism, and all these the big issues of our day. That's what success would look like for me. I know it's an ambitious goal, but in more recent years, I have no time or energy for cynicism. We have to be optimistic, and we have to be willing to fundamentally change things for the better.
All right, great. Thank you, Ali. All right. So just before we go, because I know you do have to go soon, I just want to do the trivia section. Now, I think I did say I was going to do...
Am I going to be marked on this, is the question?
Yeah, it's out of 5. So,
All right.
all right. So I did originally say Labour, but I thought I'd switch it up to Man United. I thought that'd be a bit more
man.
interesting and a bit more fun.
Yeah. Obviously, everybody knows. I get a lot of shit for this. I'm a big Man United fan, so I hope this is a good representation of being a Red.
All right. First question. Which player wore the number 7 shirt after Cristiano Ronaldo left? Is it A, Michael Owen?
Michael Owen. Yeah, it's Michael Owen.
Michael Owen? Okay.
Yeah.
It is. Fair play.
Yeah.
Good start.
Yeah. Never forget that last-minute goal against City. Even though he'll always be a Liverpool player, and so he doesn't quite get any love from Man United fans. But I remember it being Michael Owen.
See now he tarnished his Liverpool legacy by going to you lot.
No, by the way, he's the only player nobody accepts. So Manx don't want him because he's Liverpudlian, and Liverpool fans don't want him because he's a man, and Newcastle fans won't forgive him for what he did to Shearer. So no one really wants him. But he was a proper player in his day.
No, he was.
Yeah.
Second question: in what year was Old Trafford built? Is it A
Go on.
1900, B 1910, or C 1920?
I'm gonna go with the latest one, 1920.
It was actually 1910.
I was questioning whether it was made before or after the war, but yeah.
All right, next question.
Could use some renovations, you know. So one of the stands is still leaking last time I went, so
Yeah.
could use fixing that roof.
All right. Who was the only player to miss his penalty in the 2008 Champions League final win versus
Cristiano
Chelsea?
Ronaldo.
Yeah, fair play.
It was an awful penalty, by the way.
Yeah, I know. All right, next question. Who scored Bayern Munich's goal in the 1999 Champions League final? Was it A, Mario Basler, B, Carsten Janker, or C, Stefan Effenberg?
You know, I remember it was a free kick and it took a massive deflection, but I don't remember who took it. Was it Mario?
It was. Fair play.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
I remember it was a free kick and took a massive deflection, but I don't remember exactly who took the free kick.
Oh, apparently you do.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, finally, after a disastrous first half of the 2018-19 season, Mourinho was sacked just before Christmas 2018. Which of these statements regarding Mourinho's reign at United is true? Is it United won in Mourinho's final derby against Man City? Mourinho had a better win percentage than Sir Alex Ferguson? Jesse Lingard scored the last goal of Mourinho's tenure? Mourinho bought fewer than 10 players during his tenure?
Ooh, what was the first option? Can you give me the options again?
Yeah.
Cut out there.
United won in Mourinho's final derby against Man City. Mourinho had a better win percentage than Sir Alex Ferguson. Jesse Lingard scored the last goal of Mourinho's tenure. Or Mourinho bought fewer than 10 players during his tenure.
He was there for what, 2.5 seasons. I'm gonna go with the last one. Did he buy fewer than 10 players?
It was actually Jesse Lingard scored the last goal of Mourinho's tenure.
I thought it might be that.
Yeah.
All right. 3 out of 5, I think, is all right, isn't it?
That's very respectable, definitely.
Yeah, we'll do all right. We'll do all right. And the other 2 I could have gone, I guess.
Yeah.
As long as I get let into Old Trafford again, man. That's
All right. Hey, last thing I want to ask you before you go.
Yeah.
What sort of music do you listen to? I mean, what I've been asking previously is like, who's the most listened to in Spotify, Wrapped, Apple Music, but that was a little while back. So I just want to know who your artists of choice are.
Oh man, I listen to such an eclectic group kind of music. If you go through my playlist, you would get no sense as to what kind of music this person likes. Like, I love myself a little bit of Elvis Presley, a little bit of Michael. I'll listen to Sinatra. So I guess I lean a little bit older
Okay.
in my music taste. But yeah, if you had to like leave me with one, it would probably be Elvis Presley. If I could only take one like artist's music with me onto a desert island, it will probably be Elvis Presley.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, which it isn't exactly radiating the youthful kind of politics that I was advocating, but Elvis Presley is timeless, so I'll get away with that one.
All right, and any closing words?
No, man, just thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation, and I'm glad we can continue to tell the story of the campaign. So if anyone's listening and is umming and ahhing about whether they should get involved, whether they have a place in politics, I would just say absolutely do it. We could use as many of your voices as possible.
Perfect. And you want to tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah, on Twitter is @Milani_, I think, Ali Milani _UK on Instagram. Facebook's, I don't really actually have a personal Facebook anymore. It's just Ali Milani. You can find me. And yeah, you go, alimilani.com has all of our stuff on it. So if you want to get involved, we do have a book coming out soon. I'm currently in the midst of writing the story of the campaign as well. So look out for that on all of our channels, which tells the whole story of the campaign.
All right, perfect. Ali, you've been a great guest.
Awesome.
I've really enjoyed this. So thanks again for joining me today.
No,
and
thank
I wish you all
man.
the best.
It's been awesome. Take care. All the best.
All right, cheers, Ali. Bye.
What are you listening to?
The Get to Know podcast.
You're listening to the Get to Know
podcast.